Good evening, everybody. Sorry, slightly late, having some trouble with Facebook. I think they keep changing some settings whilst I record this live. So thank you for watching my post tonight. I particularly wanted to bring you a new study. I'm recording this on the 2nd of August 2022. A new study was published yesterday on the 1st of August in the American Heart Association published a study. And I love to get behind the headlines of a study because, you know, when you read a headline, it can always seem alarming, but I wanted to see how much fact there was behind the study and how much we can take this as fact. Now, this particular study was talking about red meat intake and increased risk of cardiovascular disease. We've seen this type of study before. Interestingly, this study was particularly looking at the impact of the gut as well. And I'll come on and talk about that. And I'm always very interested in these studies because let's face it, as humans, we've eaten red meat for time immemorial. So why should it be now that if we eat red meat, it's going to increase cardiovascular disease risk? So let's have a look a bit more about this study. It involved 6,000 adults. They were all over 65 years of age. It was in America. They were free from cardiovascular disease risk at the start of the study. And on average, it was taken over 12 years. The study carried out over 12 years, some for longer. Now, why am I sort of like have a little bit of skepticism about this study? Well, it's because it's an observational study. What that means is it's not done in a controlled setting. It's asking individuals over a long period of time to record food intake. So that's one aspect. How reliable is it going to be when you start recording your food intake with no control over how you record it and what you do? There's a very high degree of error when we do things like that. Now, the second thing that's really important to me also is the fact that they were only interested in animal protein consumption. This is in America, so beef, bison, venison, eggs, fish, poultry. They weren't looking at other protein sources, they weren't looking at vegetable intake, fruit intake, the types of grains you're eating, other types of food, fizzy drinks, alcohol, coffee, and it also didn't record lifestyle factors like stress, whether you're maintaining your weight, have you got healthy weight management going on over that time period, are you a smoker, what sort of exercise or not do you do, sleep quality. Now, all of these things I'm sure you're aware are going to have an impact on cardiovascular disease risk. Now, I'm particularly also interested in this study because it was showing a link, a potential link between red meat consumption and the gut microbiome, and that in turn potentially increasing the risk of cardiovascular disease. Now, what do we know about the gut microbiome in food? Well, first and foremost, the food that we eat, or indirectly the types of food that we're eating, go on and provide fuel and food for our gut microbiome. We have different bacteria. We have beneficial bacteria that we want mostly in the diet, and we also carry pathogenic bacteria that we want to control. Now, when we have a very high fibrous food intake from a very high intake of vegetables with some fruit, whole grains like brown rice, nuts and seeds and pulses, that's going to go on and feed our beneficial bacteria. And in turn, these bacteria work synergistically together. So they also provide compounds and metabolites like butyrate and other short-chain fatty acids that feed other bacteria. They create a very healthy gut environment. So that's all brilliant. That's a win-win. We want the fiber, we're eating good food, it feeds our gut bacteria, and that's all great. But what we also know is when we have a diet that's high in sugar, in salt, and in certain types of fat, a very high fat diet or processed foods, these feed pathogenic strains of bacteria. These are the bacteria that we don't want in abundance. We need to keep them under control. It's actually one of the reasons why I'm not a fan of the ketogenic diet. Now, some people love ketogenic diets because it's been shown to be good for weight loss. There are other reasons why it can be helpful, but it shouldn't be followed long term. And it can be seen in stool test results. People who follow a very high fat diet, particularly when it's high fat, at the expense of keeping fibre intake up, you can really start to see a pattern of depleted levels of beneficial bacteria and an increase in certain strains of pathogenic strains of bacteria that particularly love fat, which isn't good. So, you know, me personally, ketogenic diet, not a fan of it. Short term, short and sharp and sweet, fine. So in this study, what was the link between red meat, gut bacteria, and cardiovascular disease risk? Well, it comes back to the red meat feeding bacteria and its own compounds and metabolites that could be produced. So there's a particular compound that's been found in another study known as TMAO. Let's not worry about what the long word is for this. And this is known to create inflammation in the body. Now, this compound, which is the metabolite coming from the breakdown, digestion of our food by gut bacteria, or the wrong strains of gut bacteria, is coming from digesting an amino acid which comes from protein called L-carnitine. You might have heard of L-carnitine. Bodybuilders love L-carnitine. It enables fat to be burned more efficiently as a fuel in the mitochondria. You know, we need L-carnitine, it is important. The problem is that if we have a high intake of L-carnitine, and red meat does have a very high intake of L-carnitine. So they're saying that the potential link can be that if you eat a lot of red meat, excuse me, if you have a lot of red meat, there's a lot of L-carnitine. This can be broken down by certain strains of bacteria. It gives off this compound called TMAO. This could pass through the gut wall, find its way into the bloodstream and have an inflammatory effect in the body. And what we do know is inflammation is a driver of cardiovascular disease, particularly things like atherosclerosis, the hardening of the arteries. Interestingly, this study did not look or did not find actually blood pressure and cholesterol as being part and parcel of the problem. It was all around the raised increased risk of inflammation, possibly coming from this compound and coming from the breakdown of red meat by bacteria in our gut. So how concerned should we be from this study? Well, let's go back to what I talked about at the start. It does not prove that red meat consumption by itself increases the risk of cardiovascular disease. It does not prove, as the researchers stated, cause and effect. They cannot say that red meat causes a risk of cardiovascular disease. That's the outcome of this. It's taken out of context because it asked people on their own reporting to only look at animal protein consumption, the meats, the proteins, the poultry, fish, eggs, that type of thing. It did not look at all at other dietary factors. It didn't look at vegetable intake. It didn't look at whether it was a high sugar diet. It didn't look at whether people were eating nuts and seeds. It didn't look at whether people were eating a lot of white, refined carbohydrates, a lot of fizzy drinks, a lot of alcohol, a lot of salt, a lot of caffeine. And it certainly didn't look at the impact of lifestyle measures that can lower the risk of cardiovascular disease, like exercise, finding ways to manage stress levels, healthy weight, not smoking. So in my view, you've got to look at all of these factors in conjunction before you can start to assess what risk is going to be. It shouldn't be just looking at one factor. We need to look at all of them. And this is where it comes back to my approach when I'm working with clients, is to say, what is your healthy plate? What goes on your plate and what does a healthy plate look like? We need to be thinking about half our plate being a diverse range of vegetables with lots of different colour and variety, with a week intake of having 40 different plant foods in a week. That can include some nuts and seeds, can include a little bit of brown rice, can include herbs and spices. These are all really, really good for you. We also want to think about making sure we've got about a third of the plate being different types of protein. We don't just want one type of protein. Have as many different types of protein as you can. Yes, we need to eat protein, plant-based protein. We need to eat lentils and pulses. But we can certainly eat eggs, we can eat poultry, we need to be eating oily fish, we can have white fish, we can have shellfish, and we can certainly eat a little bit of red meat. Just don't eat it every day. Everything in moderation, I think, becomes my catchphrase. We must make sure we are having alcohol sparingly, not every single night, and cutting back on too much caffeine. And then, of course, we have to start to think about those lifestyle factors. What can we do to try and lower the stress impact that we have in our lives? Any methods that you can do that can help to control your stress levels. All of these things need to be looked at in conjunction with one another. So in my view, red meat is not a risk of cardiovascular disease, but it would be potentially if you didn't think about anything else and you didn't have vegetables and you were eating red meat every day, and perhaps it was high processed red meat as well. These are all relevant factors that we need to control. Now, if you want to get more information about my healthy plate ratios, about different types of fats that we need to eat in our diet, about lifestyle measures, sleep hygiene, stress methods that you can control, do have a look at my YouTube channel, Peyton Principles Natural Health, or on my website called Peyton Principles, where I've got lots of blogs, which is based on all of these talks that I do, and some of them recorded as podcasts. You can get loads and loads and loads of information from any of those sources. So please do go and have a look at all of those. So always, always, always think to look behind the headlines. And if you're ever unsure, do post me a little message in my Facebook group and ask me what I think about something. I'm always willing to come on and do another talk like this behind the headlines. I hope you find this helpful, putting these things into context. Yeah, anything else you'd like me to talk about, please do let me know. So thank you very much for watching again this week. I hope you found that useful. Don't be alarmed if you like to go out and have a really good quality steak. My view is you go and enjoy it, because I'm sure as one of my listeners, you're going to be having plenty of the other stuff that I've just talked about as well. Have a lovely week, everybody. Bye.